Yeah.
Welcome to the Digible Dudes podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reid.
And Reid, oh shoot, I forgot what I was going to tell you. But doesn't matter. We're talking about work from anywhere.
Yeah. I thought you were going to do a little more build up to that.
No, you know what it was? I was thinking like how we so the audience may not know, but we don't really plan ahead on this podcast.
No.
Unless Erica schedules us like a guest. Yeah. But what I was going to say is we had, I think it was like once a quarter, we were going to do something about Fiona Forward, which we have a cool guest coming up. And I think we were saying we were going to do something like Digible behind the scenes or something like once a quarter. And we just did something recently with Nicole about behind the scenes of Digible. So I'm more of saying we're already breaking the small bit of planning we had. So, but that's because we just announced this morning and we didn't want to talk about it in advance for our employees until they knew. But this morning you announced that Digible's moving to a work from anywhere policy.
Did you catch that I stole that from your article that you shared?
No. I didn't. It did dawn on me when you said work from anywhere. I was like, oh, he picked up the term or whatever, but I didn't know it was from the article or whatever, because it's pretty common, I think now.
Yeah, it is. But we hadn't been, I guess, thinking about it too much because we felt like the structure we had was already offering enough flexibility, and maybe it was. But, when I read the article that you sent, I kind of tweaked it from more of an updated WFH, work from home policy to just straight up WFA. But I also wanted to make clear that this doesn't mean WWIW, I think is what I put, which is work whenever I want.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, that's the one big, I guess, asterisk footnote to this that I personally don't think I could ever bend on, where it's like
work whenever.
Yeah. People, and it's only not because we're so controlling, but the nature of our business. We can't have somebody doing a graveyard shift if, 95% of the work we do does need to live between 9 and 5.
Yeah, I think it's good to get into the motivations behind the work from anywhere. But to that point, I think it's a slippery slope of, well, why not just work whenever? As long as like someone's there for meetings. And I think we even talked about like, okay, well, could you work, as we've talked about different things, would we allow people to work whenever they wanted? As long as we knew they were available at certain times, because the hardest part for us for that particular reason is to say, okay, well, when do team meetings happen, or when do one-on-ones happen, or what if you have a client call? And if someone with 50 people now, it's hard enough to keep track of people's schedule, let alone if whatever we are 100 people or 150 people, keeping track of the schedule seems really tough. I know a lot of tech-only companies that work that way, and Victor has, our director of engineering, has pushed a lot on asynchronous versus desynchronous work. So he's like, why not? Like, as long as you put your one-on-one stand-up in Slack, then, or whatever, your stand-up in Slack, why does it matter? Mm-hmm. But for me, I think it's more of like, you said graveyard shift, but I'm almost thinking like, would Digible feel like a graveyard if, you never knew when someone else was going to be online? If you're the only one doing work at 11 o'clock at night, does that work well for a lot of people? Or if you're the only one at 8 in the morning? Because I think I've got like Erica actually will come in early a lot of times, and she'll be the only one here. And she's like, isn't anybody working? It's like, well, we don't open till 9, but she was here at 8 and it already felt dead. So I think there's a lot of cultural implications before we could get there. But I think it'd be good for you to walk through, why the decision for work from anywhere, what's it mean for the office? Does it impact our customers at all? So on and so forth.
Yeah, totally. Well, some of this did come from, not all of it. So it's hard for me to say what, did I have an epiphany? And it wasn't like this was by any stretch all my decision, but I know I did bring it to you guys. But back to the behavior where we were seeing more and more of our employees on our Monday roundups, which happened at like 9:30, working from home. And, we believed, and I'm going to still believe, that it was mostly based on our current policy, which was tied to COVID. So it's like, as we saw the spike again happening from Omicron, that, we wanted to make sure people felt comfortable. And also, if you were traveling, hey, stay home. And so we picked a time, I think, during the holidays where there was plenty of travel happening. And so it all seemed mostly, I guess, I don't want to call it on the up and up, but, that we should expect that. But it also started to have me question, do our employees all want to be here? do they get the value, see the value of being in office? And it was also reading more and more articles, as you and I both do, trying to stay as much as we can in touch with, I'll say, the modern kind of HR practices. But as we were starting to exit, and when I say exit, I'll qualify relatively speaking, the COVID, climate or whatever, that more and more companies were offering this WFA, the work from anywhere. And so between seeing what started to feel like some trends at Digible, as well as what happened as we were kind of exiting I'll call it, I guess, the peak of COVID, that this was something we should at least talk about, because our biggest pledge to our employees is that we're going to put their happiness first. And so that isn't our purpose, to be a role model for employee culture and a catalyst for progressive change. And so staying true to that, I felt like, it was time for us to discuss this and see where we landed. But in addition to that, we've dealt with a lot of challenges here with pipeline. And so some of this wasn't as much like, should we allow our current employees to go work from home any day, as much as it was also trying to open up our recruitment to out of market, which we hadn't really done. We've had some examples of that, but mostly we've hired here locally in Denver. And so given our growth, again, challenges with pipeline, it was one more reason to bring this forward and say, hey, if we were to offer this, work from anywhere, then that also would allow us to potentially open up quite a bit our recruitment to get other talent. And I had a litany of other reasons that I thought this made sense, whether it was, retention, whether it was trying to stay kind of competitive with or up to date with trends out there, et cetera, et cetera. But I wouldn't say those were overly compelling. The two that really were the top motivators was, hey, are we actually taking away happiness on some level from let's say an Allie who recently had her baby just a few months ago and would love to have a little more optionality to spend more time with her kid, or whether it's somebody that actually is driving 45 minutes every day to get to Digible, and that is an hour and a half every time that they come into the office. And so wouldn't that be potentially better for them? So, and then for those that are more heads down, they're not as interested or not as excited about the social interaction, and they prefer to be at home and get through their work there. So that was enough more on the happiness side. And then I think I already laid it out there on recruitment, but none of these were like slam dunks for me. And even though it might've felt like that, and I'll shut up here in a second, but when I brought this to you guys, I didn't want you or Nicole, Lurch, Brian feeling like this was something I guess I wanted for myself, because, I very much love seeing people in the office and thrive off of it. So I always wanted to keep this in-office experience. I was more just, trying to get in front of what was starting to become clear to me, I guess, as an opportunity and a need to offer more optionality in the office. But you had quite a bit of concerns, and I thought they were great, and you weren't the only one. So I'm not saying this was kind of a David and Reed thing, but there was a lot, and there will be a lot that, we're going to be, I guess, looking at and seeing, if this turns out to work out, or if this actually does potentially jeopardize some of the culture that we built up here.
Yeah, and when we started Digible, you and Nicole were the first ones to say we should get an office. I was like, what the hell do we need an office for? But I will say that, like, as we decided to make the expense to get our second office, because that felt like a big one. We were going from like $600 a month to $3,000 a month. I was like, we're going to 5X this. Why? We're still losing money. But it did mentally make a big difference. I think there's also, we've seen with a lot of folks, like if you work from home in your sweatpants all the time, it's different than getting up and getting ready for work and then going in. And I'll even tell my employees sometimes when they're when they're remote and they're like mentally feeling hard at getting started, I'm like, treat it like you're getting ready for work. Get dressed,
Take a shower.
make your coffee. Yeah. Even if you have to go to Starbucks and come back, like it just mentally gets you in the groove. But I was more worried about what you said, is we've spent all this time building culture, and we hear it from our employees that they love the culture here. And it's kind of like the bad apple thing, where it's like it can start to decay a little bit, and then it's a slippery slope sometimes to turn around. And since we didn't build the company as remote first, and remote has been, I'll say, second, because we've had some employees that are remote, but that there's a lot that we need as management to change, probably about our processes, how we foster the culture and so on and so forth. And some things I think we have in place, like the taco program where, in Slack, you give someone recognition. So that's already like sort of a remote style recognition program. But I think there's going to be more to that we can't get lazy on. I think when you are a company that's always coming to the office, it allows you to be a little bit more lax on culture, like being deliberate with culture, than if everyone's remote all the time. I think you have to make it more of a focus, I guess. Mm-hmm. And so I just, as we move into Q2 planning, I feel like it's important that leadership has a rock tied to this somehow, so that things don't just start to peel off and people almost are like, oh, think of the good old days when we used to be forced to come into the office. But it was only obviously 3 days a week. And I felt like that was a good mix for people. One final thing on that, I didn't send you this article, but Google just announced people to come back, that they have to come back. And their CEO was saying that he thinks that the modern work is probably going to be more of like a 3x2, like 3 days in office, 2 days remote, and at least for Google. And obviously we were doing 3x1.
That was so yesteryear.
Yeah, right. So I think what the risk for us on this, when it came to 4-day work week, we did a lot of planning and we spent a whole year like prepping for it. This is something we've been talking about more for like 5-6 weeks, and there hasn't been as much prep that we've done. So with 4-day work week, we put in things like how are we going to measure performance? How are we going to make sure that we're still maintaining the productivity? With this, we are just like jumping in and it's not as prepped. You didn't want to take like a survey ahead of time to say, are employees happier with this move or not? You kind of wanted their actions to speak for it. But that is, I guess, one outside concern is without the baseline data points, it's going to be hard for us to say what is the impact of this before and after. It'll be more of a feeling.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's some things we should be able to get at, and we do a good job in virtually every department. We take weekly pulses of our employees. So that would be one data point, but it's more kind of spread out. So we'll have to figure ways to kind of aggregate some of our data that, gets at the happiness factor. From an efficiency standpoint, that is easier to get at. As far as just jumping right in, that was part of actually my comfort doing this is I feel like we have been almost already in this structure, and not something you and I'll say loved, where we were seeing, it almost felt like more and more employees were on Zoom than were in office on Monday roundups, or it was getting to a point where it was like two-thirds at best was in office. And so that was telling me, hey, this is already happening. And then we had worked for a year and a half in a fully remote structure and had done extremely well. I thought both of us, would qualify what happened at the peak of the pandemic as that was forced. So you can't expect the same kind of behavior and cultural like connectivity that was happening then, because everybody was crawling the walls and they were just desperate to stay connected, to happen if you make it a choice, or offer it up as a choice, I should say. So I think that's totally fair, and I'll be watching that. But back to like my confidence level, it just seemed like I couldn't predict who was going to be here and who wasn't each week that I was walking in. And I don't want to say that's sad. I just, I think that was kind of a nature of the way we built it, and also had a lot to do, like I said, with the traveling and COVID and whatnot. But then I asked myself, it's like, well, how much of a problem was that, for the department heads? And I think what I got back, including from you, was like, it can be a little annoying, I'll say, or a nuisance, some aggravation, but not anything that was like a games, or whatever, a non-starter for you, where it's like, yeah, it's been a nightmare when that happens. Or Nicole, she has one of the bigger teams, and she was like, yeah, sometimes it's can be a little frustrating on a Zoom if you can't hear each other, or if, I thought somebody was going to come in and then they're not here. But truthfully, like, it's not a huge deal. So we'll see if it gets worse. Hopefully it doesn't, because, we're really trying to lean into this. You mentioned when we talked about it last week, you were like, I feel like we're somewhere in the middle right now, like, almost, are we making a decision if we're not making a decision, by making this fully optional? And you knew my response was, I think we're leaning into that full bore, like we're making a total commitment to optionality here at Digible. And it may not be the right choice, like I said. And don't want to say that's the fear, but you were like, how would we ever walk this back? And I think that would be a lot. So it's I don't see it as some huge gamble or bet, because I think we'll definitely pump out the work regardless. The question is, how much will the culture change as a result? And I would cry truly, like if it felt like we were all now just like we lost the magic.
I think there's going to be, change is always hard on people. And I think there's going to be change from it. But I think the way I looked at it, because I did put up a lot of concerns where I was like, why do this if it's not the biggest problem right now? And it didn't, there, as you said at the beginning, there wasn't like an obvious win. Like there was like, hey, we think maybe. And so anyways, but my thought on it was, I do think, obviously when we open ourselves up for, to accept people anywhere, then it does increase recruiting pipeline. My thought on that was we just never got really concentrated on a recruiting pipeline anyways, right. But it doesn't matter, because it's like, well, if that solves us from having to spend money on recruiting or something, then I guess there's a benefit. Then when it came down to the productivity gain or loss, I don't really think there's going to be that much of a difference. I think there's going to be some wins and losses. So I always like the osmosis that people get from hearing other people talk in the office. But some people also have more focus when they're at home and they don't have a distraction. I think we're going to have to do something though for like the water cooler talk to get people more connected, because we've had you were saying hopefully retention goes up, and the theory behind that is, well, if you have to move for family reasons, now you don't have to leave your job. But on the other end, we've had people that we interview, and they're like, hey, I wish my company had an office because I just want to see people. So there's that problem. So I think it's all of these things are basically a win and a loss, so that in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, they all just cancel themselves out. So then long term, did I have enough of a reason to say we can't, or we shouldn't? And there wasn't enough of a reason to say we shouldn't, besides like maybe culture will be impacted, which is then back to where I'm saying we just have to put a focus to make sure that culture is not impacted. And we deliberately, maybe it was 3 years ago in our old office when we had the conversation where I was saying, how much do we want to try to engineer culture versus how much do we want it to be organic? And you at the time were very much about organic, and I agreed with that. But I do think we'll have to be a little bit more deliberate with culture in this other environment. Because my first startup, I was remote for the first half of it. And that was 2002 or something. And so it was a very different experience then than now. But I still remember, like, it can feel very isolating and like, and lonely, basically. And everyone was suffering that in the pandemic, and they were so excited to get back to the office. So I think it's just, since we're going to do this hybrid option, we're going to have to make sure like it feels welcoming if you're in, but also welcoming if you're out. And then do our best to try to, just keep people engaged. And if we see people not engaged, it's a little bit harder it's kind of out of sight, out of mind in some ways when they're remote. So if they're not engaged, that'll just be on management to be way more in tune with it. And then, decide what action to take if it seems like someone's really drifting apart and just kind of,
Yeah, we are putting, some added, I guess, responsibility, hopefully not stress on our management team. To your point, like they are going to need to do a few things, I think, a little differently, and most importantly, be intentional about keeping that culture top of mind. And but hopefully that's not a bad thing. Maybe they're not even thinking about it enough right now because they're taking for granted that we have the in-office time, versus like really being thoughtful about getting the group together. And I ask from time to time, and more happens than you and I, of course, would know, as far as happy hours and little get-togethers, which is always puts a smile on my face when I hear that that's happening. So good to see that. And it made me think a little bit about the book, Delivering Happiness, that you and I are both listening to or reading right now, with Tony Hsieh from Zappos. He just talked about how great the culture felt when they were 25 or less, and it was because most of them were friends. Mm-hmm. And he was like, when we got past that, we started to not even know who was there, and we never built relationships with them, and it just quickly, like, the culture evaporated, mm-hmm. And he didn't even want to come in anymore. He was kind of jaded about it. So
that was pre-Zappos.
Yeah, pre-Zappos, right? Yeah. Leak Exchange, yeah, before they sold.
But
Microsoft.
That's what made him deliberate with Zappos.
Yeah.
And I'm impressed with a lot of what they've done. And we'll obviously get to that book probably on another session or something, but I was impressed with a lot of what they did. But obviously it took a lot of effort.
Yeah. But coming back to what do we expect will happen, and how are we going to try, I'll say, get in front of the potential for cultural decay? You mentioned osmosis, and you said that many times, which I couldn't agree more. Like the value of that, of coming in the office and being around people that are more experienced, have been there, done that, or from different departments that are talking about things. That would be one of the things that we would need our managers, or even the people that have experienced that in onboarding, to be actively kind of promoting, right, or talking about. So as Sophie, if a new AC comes in, we would want her to let them know, hey, I got a ton of value out of being in the office. So that's part of it, is finding almost sponsors, I guess. And hopefully that happens organically, not something we have to tap people for to say, hey, talk about all the benefits of being in office. But that's one thing I will look for. The other thing though is giving people a reason to come in outside of, I'll say, just the knowledge sharing. And I think even with some of the small stuff, like allowing dogs, like people love having their dogs, getting to interact with other dogs. They do, I think, appreciate the snacks. They appreciate the space, the location, the convenience of going down to Mango. And where I'm going with all this, and I think that was also in the book, but it's just like, creating that environment. And some of it can just be your own location. So that people really get value, really appreciate coming in. And that's where I would like to be in a position to buy this building, so that you and I felt more comfortable and committed, I guess, to investing in it. Yeah. We were super excited about the idea of an eatery downstairs. And I think that, again, keep coming back to this book because it's fresh, but he just talked about how he eventually, didn't he did they buy their own restaurant or something?
Yeah. In San Francisco, he bought a space and has his parents manage the restaurant.
Yeah. And so I'm not saying we're going to do that, but it's like if we had a gym downstairs, because he did mention, and we hear about it with all the big tech companies, but they try and create campuses. So there isn't this feeling like I got to go somewhere else to get, my fitness, to get, my food, all that stuff. And we're a long ways away from that. And I don't want to create some artificial, I guess, campus or cult, so that people are always staying here. But I do want to find as many opportunities as we can. I think we've already done a good job of that, of giving them a reason to come in. Because when we did talk to those two people recently, one of which, was our former colleague, Tom, from the Post, he said, the building that they're in now, they have the choice. And he's like, it's some weird, creepy, feels like a haunted school, and there's no windows and all this stuff. He's like, nobody wants to go in for that. So at least we have giant windows.
For now.
We have for now.
You were saying, because we have two spaces in this building, and we knocked down a wall to expand into them. And then it's like, if no one's coming in, why keep paying the lease on the other space? That we would lose.
Then we'd lose our light, windows. The natural light.
Yeah, we'd have to start buying those indoor UV thing or whatever those are, vitamin D lights. I do think as I said, there's going to be a difference. I think if you look at Google, where they were remote through the pandemic, and then they're like, you got to come back now. It's like, even if you have a Google campus, some people don't want to be there. Mm-hmm. So it's tough, because I think it's important for, I guess, every company to decide what they really want and what's the purpose of coming in. And we had wanted the purpose to come in because we wanted people to feel more connected when we first bought this bigger space, and we wanted them to feel each other's energy and learn from one another. Everyone knows it just is different on Zoom. But who knows? Maybe we'll buy everybody Meta headsets or something now, and we'll just get the energy that way.
Yeah, that would probably do it. Well, it's really hard though, because as you said, even with Google, it has you and I have had a chance. You've been there twice. I've been there once, but their campus is pretty remarkable. But that they would still have some engineers or whoever that wouldn't want to come in for that. And I think that is reality, is we're not all, social creatures, I guess, or covet that interaction, but that person can still do amazing work, have tremendous value, but they're just not going to be one of the bigger cultural contributors. And are you okay with that? And that's a decision each business has to make for itself, because that could be where we drew the line is, we value this so much, we want this, that if somebody isn't, and it sounds kind of gross because it almost sounds like we'd be discriminating, but if they didn't value that, it's more about the values the way that we do, then, they just don't make sense for the company. But that we didn't draw that line. And then that in combination with the hiring, I mean, that was one of the bigger motivators for me. And you've made a very fair point. You've said it over and over the last couple of years that we just haven't done a very good job. And part of it is time. We don't have a recruiter, and it is extremely competitive out there, but we haven't done a great job of keeping the pipeline full. So it feels like we're just one critical player away in a lot of departments from, things, getting ourselves in a mess.
I'd say it's because we're playing like our investment so close to the vest. So we'll wait till like we just got this big order. We definitely need some headcount because we're going to be at 110% capacity. And so then we're in this pickle because we didn't want to hire too far in front of anything. I think
we also don't have the cash flow, as much as we'd like, for provisional. Sorry, go ahead.
I think back to the what do you want the person to do? I think as you were saying, like part of our one of our core values is happiness, and then it's in our vision statement. And so that's where, as you said, we do have everybody rank their happiness every week, but we don't aggregate that to the company yet to then track like, oh shoot, organic media's happiness is declining or something. So that's, I guess, a good Q2 takeaway for us to do, so that we can measure the impact. Because to your point, if it's not too far, or it's not hard to imagine, I don't believe, if it's like, you don't need to be a cultural contributor as long as you do good work. And then all of a sudden you could end up with just an army of people that do, quote, good work, but now no one's happy. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's key. And Tony says that in his book too, where he was like, there are lots of people they didn't hire that were way more qualified, but because they weren't humble. And he's like, we're not going to hire someone with a big ego. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it just applies here to, so I think as long as we keep a good handle on it, and then we don't get ourselves into like Digible's all about profit and good work, and I guess as part of our vision, hopefully we'll stay true to that.
Yeah, totally. Well, it was interesting because when we announced the 4-day work week, and of course I played the sick joke on April 1st, that we were selling when in fact we were going to announce the 4-day work week, but people were ecstatic. I mean, you saw them like cheering, and you took some good video or a screen recording on Zoom of their reaction. That was not at all the reaction we got this morning, and it wasn't a disappointment. And I didn't
hold on. What's our new? Is it this one? Yeah. Yeah, you had
David.
crickets.
Yeah, David and I have been waiting for an opportunity, I guess, to mess with some of these drops. You threw me off. Yeah, the crickets. But I mean, it wasn't far from crickets. And I don't know if some of it was like it does a lot of times with big news, just takes a minute, for it to sink in or for them to absorb it. But I also think there was quite a few people that were like, please don't tell us that this somehow means, and maybe I was reading into it, but that we're not going to keep the office, or that you guys are somehow devaluing the office, which actually felt good. I wasn't bothered by that. I was really hoping for that reaction. What would have been more unsettling is if we got the same reaction. Instead you could tell a lot of people were like, I like being here. I like seeing, my colleagues, the energy here is great. So in some level I was glad that we didn't get a bunch of cheers when we announced it. And you mentioned, I didn't have anybody yet, but a couple people may have come up to you right away and said, hey, just to that effect, right? Yeah. That they enjoyed coming in and they didn't.
That they were worried that people weren't going to come in now. And so I think, again, we'll see how it shakes out. And obviously we'll keep everybody updated on that. But cat's out of the bag. So here we go.
Long story short, David has his doubts and Reid is mostly confident.
Yeah.
It'll be all right.
I know. I don't have any worry that it won't be all right. I just say it'll be different. And I do think we can end up alienating if things changed a lot. I think some of the folks that we have will feel like the magic is lost. But then you'll have a new crew that comes in and feels like it's got the magic. It's funny because when my first job, my first paying job, or whatever, real job with a paycheck, I worked at the Dollar Movie Theater, the Cinemark in Louisville. And I remember after that first summer, I think it was my first summer there, Amber had was the general manager of it. And I remember we were sitting outside, on a break, I was like, oh man, Amber, aren't you sad that the summer's almost over? Like all these employees are going to go back to school and we just won't have this again. And she's like, no. I was like, what do you mean? I was like, this is an incredible group that we have, great culture. Everyone loves it. And she's like, this happens every year. And she was just so flat and just like felt cold about it. I was like, dude, I can't believe that you don't care about like, because she didn't focus on culture. It was just, I guess luck for her that I was there for 6 years and it just always seemed like there was a good group and there was a new group, a fresh group. And they, in their own way, had fun and didn't make this job that was $5.50 an hour suck. I mean, that could suck, but the culture is what made it. And that's why I stayed there for so long. And I feel like from that lesson, I guess that's where I'm going here, where it's like, we may have, this summer's over, but there's going to be the next group that comes in. So if some of them fall out of favor now, that's going to be a bummer, but whatever, the new group,
that's right. Will be happy. That's right. And it could, very well turn out that way for at least a few people. Hope it doesn't, but it's something that we need to be prepared for. I don't want to go full like FOMO, but back to, what would be the reason to come in? If we do get more committed, and some of that depends on obviously some of the economics, but there's plenty of things we can do that don't depend on budget per se. But I'm just saying, if we can do a little bit more here at the office and with the group, then I wouldn't want to be the one left out of that. That's all I'm saying. If I just stayed at home all the time and saw it, whether it's happy hours or I guess some of the stuff offsite too, but a lot of that would originate here, meaning if we were to go whitewater rafting or going for hikes or, going across the street for a beer, whatever that is. But that gets back to where almost you started, which is we'll need our management team to put a little bit more attention or focus on keeping up, culture and morale. And
well, you've never wanted a ping pong table.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm thinking we incentivize people. If 51% of the company show up in any given day, then you do the dunk tank.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm thinking. We get 3 shots to dunk Reid.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I bet lots of people get on board with that really fast, or some sort of ice challenge.
Yeah, the fourth day in a row, they're like, okay, we've had enough dunk tape, Reid. What's next?
It's better to get David up there now. Well, we'll see. I wouldn't have done it if I didn't believe in it, and believe, I guess, in our company to be able to pull this off. To me, it is one more indicator that we're trying to stay in front of things. And even if Google, is now reverting back to some sort of hybrid schedule, I still love that we're taking, these types of risks for the benefit, at least we believe, for the benefit of our employees. Yeah. So fingers crossed.
Well, no change for clients or anything. I mean, they all see it's remote anyways.
Yeah, no change for them.
I'd say maybe the only thing is we've had a number of clients ask us if we're hiring. And so that would be I could see some of our clients, it's like, well, no, now you can be remote. Although I guess we didn't say, like, you have this in FAQ, so maybe we'll wrap up with this, but how this could impact someone's career. And I think in the FAQs you say, hey, it's not going to intentionally impact anyone's career, but back to how leadership needs to work to maintain culture and keep people engaged. I feel like that a lot of that onus is also on the employee now.
Right.
If you're fully remote, you have to do your best to try to stay engaged, raise your hand for projects, so on and so forth. I mean, it's easy if you're just walking past someone and they hear whatever, Digible's going to host an award ceremony and they're like, oh, I'd love to help run that. Mm. But if you're remote and you didn't hear about that conversation in passing, you were interested, you wouldn't know and you wouldn't get tapped. So any comments on as far as employee development and how this might impact things?
It is super important here at Digible, and we wouldn't want anybody thinking that this decision was going to somehow negatively, I guess, impact their opportunity to move up or, into one of the new roles here. But I couldn't agree more. And I did say it in the FAQ and probably didn't hit it, I guess, enough this morning, but it's not management's responsibility to own that. We really need our employees, for those that are deciding to opt for more of a work from home or work from anywhere approach, that they take some accountability, self-accountability, and staying connected, finding ways to still go above and beyond that don't require them to be in office, which there is plenty of room for that. And I was glad that you shared that article. You said that, I think, just with leadership, but from the New York Times that talked just about that. And, I think that was from a few other companies that have already gone this route, but how they were thinking a little differently about employee development in a mostly, if not fully remote, like structure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll be interested to see that though. And hopefully, our employees come through.
Yeah. One final thing is we worked a lot last year on trying to improve our equity and diversity pipeline, because Denver is just, it doesn't have a lot of diversity.
No, it's not built in the way it is in some other cities.
Right. So that's the other thing. That's the other benefit I didn't get into last week, but I'd been thinking about over the last few days, is how much this could help us as we.
That's a great point.
Yeah. We just have more options for a more diverse population.
Yep. Cool.
All right. Well, let's get out of here, Reid.
All right.
Here.
Any drop here? Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. All right, yeah, we'll kill it down. All right, guys. Well, thanks for staying tuned.
See ya.
See you later.